When you hear that sound at 8:30 on a Friday morning, that can only mean one thing. The man himself, Dr. Robert A. Heineman, political science professor emeritus, Alfred University.
So that's what it means.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
How you doing, Doc?
Well, I'm doing pretty well so far, thank you, Brian.
Today's vote in the House. Now, I see Congressman Tom Reed sent out an email saying that he's got a press conference coming up at 1 p.m. today. I'm guessing that means that they'll have just voted by that point.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it is kind of interesting to talk just a moment about voting in the House of Representatives because basically there are three ways that votes can be cast in the House of Representatives. In the old days, when I was still a young man, the record vote would take a good 45 minutes to an hour, maybe longer, to register. But now, of course, we have automated voting, and you can take a vote in 10 or 15 minutes pretty easily. So that's the way a lot of some of these recorded votes are taken. But there are two other ways that votes can be taken in the House of Representatives. One of them is by simple voice vote. Those in favor yell out aye, and those opposed yell out no or nay. And the Speaker then decides which has the more volume. And another approach is a so-called standing vote, whereby those in favor stand, and actually that's enough, I think. I don't know if those opposed stand again, but you can just tell by those standing, by a quick glance, if there's enough to carry the vote. So Speaker Pelosi has guaranteed today that there'll be a vote and that it will pass, and the question is she going to call back all the members from around the country to vote? And one way of avoiding that, of course, is to go with a voice vote or a standing vote. And there's no record who voted how, and that's an advantage, I think, to some of these congressmen as well. But there's another thing, another way you could do it. You could go with a recorded vote, even if you don't have a whole lot of congressmen there. First of all, you have to have a quorum, so you have to have 218. But what a lot of these Congress people will do is they might pair with another congressman, so that if you got somebody who's in favor of the bill and somebody who's opposed, they can pair their votes. And that way, the congressman who can't be there is sort of the other congressman then abstains. So you can kind of do it that way. But I'm thinking the vote on this, well, it's hard to tell. You could well have some AOC and some of these other fringe elements still unwilling to vote for it. But there are several ways that she can go about it. So I think she feels she's got pretty much support across both parties. So I think we'll see a vote today sometime.
Dr. Heineman, I want to ask you about incumbents in general being in a situation like this. And would I be right to say an incumbent would have to do a pretty bad job to get kicked out if they handle the COVID-19 situation well, or your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think incumbency generally gives you an advantage. It gives you all kinds of advantages in terms of being able to announce things, being able to send out questionnaires, things of that sort. And in terms of helping your constituents, if you're up to snuff in terms of paying attention to what's going on in your district. I think where incumbents get themselves in trouble, first of all, this last time around, of course, Trump had irritated a lot of people, and that hurt him in the suburbs. But The other problem is like with the minority whip or the majority whip in the House, Cantor, who felt that he was in pretty good shape in Virginia, spent a lot of time going around the country speaking at fundraisers for fellow congressmen, and basically was not paying attention to the people in his district, and was defeated in the primary by somebody who pretty well known in his district, had a lot of church backing, and so there are several ways incumbents can shoot themselves in the foot, but generally speaking, if they're halfway conscientious, they've got a pretty good advantage there.
How about an incumbent like the Vice President, Mike Pence? Does this help Mike Pence avoid Trump dumping Pence for Nikki Haley?
I have no idea. And a lot of that depends on, as you're suggesting, how this virus situation turns out. But also it depends on what the Democrats do, which does lead us into another element here, what we might discuss, and that is where is the presidential election today? And right now, of course, I think the Democrats are concerned, despite themselves, there's not much they can do about it, with the fact that Trump is piling up a lot of pretty good support around the country for his fairly decisive approach to the whole coronavirus pandemic here. And I think you got to give him credit. I mean, they really are doing everything they can to save the lives of Americans. But what's also interesting here is that in the vote Thursday or Wednesday night, Bernie Sanders got up on the floor and pushed his support for this increased unemployment benefits, and made a pretty strong statement. And I think got among the elements of the Democrat Party got some pretty good support. And in the meantime, Biden has sort of disappeared. And I guess my understanding is, and I didn't get a chance to watch him, the few public appearances that he's made have not been particularly dynamic at all, that he's been stumbling around, saying things that don't make a lot of sense, and not looking good at all. And clearly, I guess, recently, he's declined to have another debate.
That's interesting that you say that, Doc, because I'm looking at Real Clear Politics' latest polls, and both of them have Biden almost 20 points ahead of Bernie Sanders. What do you make of that?
Well, I think, again, if they can keep Biden undercover, I guess Bernie is going to get hit pretty hard. But there are a number of things happening out there. A number of states are thinking about delaying the Democrat primary, presidential primary. And as you know, in New York State now, there's a growing momentum for delaying the Democrat primary in New York State. And I think part of this is because Governor Cuomo is beginning to get a lot of national attention, and most of it pretty favorable. And so, as we predicted or suggested on the show 2 or 3 months ago, Cuomo is beginning to emerge as a viable Democrat candidate on the presidential front.
You heard it here first, and you heard it here from Dr. Bob.
Thank you so much, Brian. But the point is, how does he get on the ballot? Well, if they delay the Democrat presidential primary, which I think is scheduled right now for April 23rd, if they delay that, it's possible that they could do a couple of things. I think it's quite possible Cuomo's name could end up on the ballot, or they could run a slate of unpledged delegates, with the understanding that if the unpledged delegates carry the day, or at least pick up a number of spots, then Cuomo would have some support taking him into the convention. all he needs is 15, 20 delegates. Actually, he'd obviously like to have more, but as long as they take him into the convention, enough to give him, and I don't know, they may have a threshold limit on that. I don't before I go too far there, but it gives him a chance to have his name tossed out there, and have somebody nominate him, and then it gets interesting. Then it gets really interesting. So the key here is if they can maneuver him into a position where his name is offered on the floor of the convention. I think going to a brokered convention at this point without his name being offered, that's going to be very tough for him to pull that out. I think there Biden could well end up with a nomination. And that would be, to put it mildly, I think, a pretty embarrassing situation for the Democrats. But I'm not a Democrat, so they'll have to work it out themselves. But I do think Cuomo has come on very strong, and with good reason. I think even though New York is having the numbers in New York are substantially above any of the other states right now, still, I think he's done a pretty good job of holding things under control. And when you compare the death rate, for example, in New York State, or even in the United States, but certainly in New York State, with some of these other countries, I mean, it's not good, but it's certainly better than what's going on in a lot of these other countries.
Governor Cuomo's come out a lot better in his public appearances in this than we can guess that, well, not guess. Mayor Bill de Blasio has not come across well in this crisis. I don't think anyways, Dr. Bob. Governor Cuomo's been chiding the mayor about the huge public crowds in New York and telling the mayor of New York City to get some crowd control.
I think one of the problems is that de Blasio is basically incompetent, and it shows up. And if he didn't have one of our former students there, Mr. Flanagan, as his deputy mayor, I'd hate to guess what a mess New York City would be in. So no, it's got to. Of course, there's competition between the New York City mayor and the governor in any case, but it's got to drive Cuomo up the wall. Some of the stuff that de Blasio is trying to pull, and of course he is a Bernie supporter, so it may be part of it too. Although I'm not sure why.
All right, this is the part of the show where Dr. Bob and I are going to talk about how State Senator John Flanagan wrecked things for State Senator Kathy Young, and then State Senator John Flanagan announced just this week that he's going to join the 8 other Republicans who've already left and not seeking re-election this fall. Dr. Bob, go ahead and slam John Flanagan.
Oh, I wouldn't do that, Brian. All I can say is good riddance, John. No, that's a pretty sorry show on his part from start to finish. Once he removed Kathy Young as campaign manager for the Senate campaign, where was that last summer, 2 summers ago? That was downhill from that point on, and I think it's the worst beating the Republicans taken since the 1920s. In the state Senate. And with him stepping down now, and that may encourage a couple others to step down, I think, they had 23 Republican senators out of 63 senators. And with him stepping down and the others, as you're suggesting, stepping down, they must be down to something like 14 incumbents who are running for re-election. And you can see where that's going. That's going nowhere.
Right.
So at this point, the governor is an even stronger position. I mean, they got almost. I think they have 2/3 of the state assembly, or very close to it, and they'll have more than 2/3 of the New York State Senate, unless the Republicans make some sort of unbelievable resurgence there, which I think is highly unlikely. And if they don't have at least a third in either the Assembly or the State Senate, then the Democrats can redraw the districts in 2020 any way they want. Yeah, it's a disaster for the Republicans there.
Yeah, we can't slam State Senator John Flanagan, the outgoing senator from Long Island, enough on this show. Dr. Robert Heineman, we had Assemblywoman Marjorie Burns on yesterday. We talked a little bit about the budget. We had Mayor John Buckley on yesterday. He talked about the Hornell City budget. And the whole topic of how they're going to bring in revenue was a big subject. I see Spectrum is reporting that the assembly members and senators are going to be all there through video, online video. They're not going to be in a big room all together. And something Governor Andrew Cuomo brought up is that the Senate bill, the U.S. Senate bill from a Wednesday night, it's going to help individuals, it's going to help businesses, but it did not address, Governor Cuomo says, the problems that city halls and state government, etc., are going to be facing with a lack of revenues, with a lack of taxes. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, Governor Cuomo has a point there, and obviously, Senator Schumer and Gillibrand were doing what they could there, and Schumer's pretty defensive about this at this point. But I think President Trump's view is, there are a lot of things New York State's been doing over the years, in areas like Medicaid and some of these others. Basically preventing any kind of economic or fracking activity in upstate New York, so that this attempt by the governor to basically create economic health and jobs by pumping state money into areas, it just doesn't work, and so. The regulations and things that you have to face in New York State has hurt the economy to start with. On the other hand, when Governor Cuomo says New York State contributes more to the federal budget or the federal revenue than any other state in the country, I think he's right on that. And so his feeling is that, we're entitled to a little bit more here. I don't know. I mean, it was a tough battle there in the Senate and the House to get this thing passed, this economic recovery bill passed. So I'm not a big fan of Schumer's, but I think he did what he could, and that leaves Governor Cuomo unhappy. But I do think in terms of getting aid to the health care industry and such, the Trump administration has been doing a pretty fantastic job to get help on those areas. But that, of course, doesn't cover some of the budget losses that they're going to have, because they certainly are going to see some real drops in state income. On the other hand, all this talk about an economic depression and recession and such, unless I think are overblown. I think there's a tremendous amount of pent-up demand out there in the economy, and once stores are able to open and restaurants are able to open and such, I think the economy is going to pick up pretty fast. But again, if this virus hangs on for 2 or 3 months, then it does slow everything down.
On that topic, President Donald Trump put out a new set of guidelines, and he did this on Thursday afternoon. Dr. Heineman, do you mind if I read a little bit of the letter from President Trump to the governors about the guideline changes?
John.
Okay. It says, let me get a little closer here. This is what we envision. Our expanding testing capabilities will quickly enable us to publish criteria developed in close coordination with the nation's public health officials and scientists to help classify counties with respects to continued risks posed by the virus. This will incorporate robust surveillance testing, which will allow us to monitor the spread of the virus throughout the country. And Dr. Bob, he being Trump, has talked more than once about this is not a one-size-fits-all situation. Your thoughts?
Well, I think if you apply that to New York State, one problem there from Cuomo's point of view is that if you do loosen things up in an area, then you may well have these people from Westchester and Manhattan moving out into some of these other areas, and so I can see.
So maybe that's why he's been doing it.
I'm sorry?
So maybe that's why he's been doing strict rules upstate.
It might be. That would be a possible spin-off from doing something like that, yeah.
We've been talking to Dr. Robert Heineman, Alpha University political science professor emeritus. We're doing this on the phone, well, for obvious reasons. COVID-19. Dr. Bob, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
All right. Try to stay healthy there, Brian, and we'll talk again.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Okay. Bye.